Sir Rick here, reminding you to tune in to our new segment called The Sledgehammer, featuring those who make a legal difference in our industry.
All right, and we are back here on BCB Live, the safest station in the nation. We have Adam Blanchard, co-founder and CEO at Double Diamond Transport. Also, I want to make sure we mention that he is also a board member of the ATA, TCA, Texas Trucking Association, and much, much more. He has a voice. He has a voice here in trucking, and it is necessary to hear what's going on. All right, Adam, we brought you on to talk a little bit about this legal case and what it means and what it says about going on here in Texas in our industry. You want to lead us into what it's about?
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Dave, to you and your listeners for having me on. I always enjoy being on your show and everything y'all are doing for the industry. So great to be with you today. Look, we've got a case now that finally we're starting to see some relief here from the intermediate court level of these. I wouldn't say this is a nuclear verdict case, but certainly of the volume and magnitude of these cases and just the disproportionate jury rewards we're starting to see in some of these counties here in Texas. We've got a case where we have an oversized load coming out of the Midland Permian Basin area with some oil field equipment. Ends up missing the route, as most of you and your listeners know. When that occurs here with an oversized load in Texas, you got to get rerouted. So turns, tries to get back on track, and unfortunately hits a bridge, an overpass when he was doing that. Had some of the equipment fall off, and it injures somebody. Certainly in cases like this, as you and all your listeners know, we want to make these folks whole, but having a $7 million verdict is what the outcome was of this case. And this is exactly what we're seeing day in and day out on these truck accident claims here in Texas, and something that we've been working on at the state legislative level. And fortunately, we've got some good law firms similar to this case that are also fighting these in the court system, because it's going to take a two-pronged attack to start bringing these verdicts back down. And fortunately, we're starting to see some of these appellate courts here in Texas take notice of how exaggerated these verdicts are. And so in this case, they kick this back down for a new trial at the district court level, so that we can look at this again and have a more appropriate verdict given the circumstances.
Does this allow for us in these these middle courts? Does it allow for precedents to be created to overturn some of these and go back at them a little bit more frequently? If they're taking the stance on this, it means they're able to do that on others just as easily, correct?
Absolutely. So you have state district courts, right, which is where we always start off, and then once the case ends there, if it goes to a verdict, then you can appeal that to the intermediate court level, Court of Appeals, and from there you can appeal it all the way up to the Texas Supreme Court. So it's really 3 levels here in Texas. Yes, the precedent that is set at the Court of Appeals level, that precedent applies to all of the district courts that fall underneath their veil. And then if you take it all the way up to the Texas Supreme Court, that's going to apply to not only all of the appellate courts that fall underneath them, but every court really in the state of Texas. So a great start here. I think what we're seeing here, Dave, is exactly what we sought to accomplish with the passage of House Bill 19 last legislative session. I mean, if you look at this lawsuit, they sued him not only for the negligence of the driver, but then also for the negligence of the company and their hiring practices, negligent entrustment, negligent per se. They even went as far as to include in their lawsuit that this was an enterprise or joint venture claim. I mean, so, this reptile theory where you throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. I mean, this is a perfect case study on what that outcome looks like, because if you don't have a bad accident, then what they're going to do is they're going to use these other causes of action to distract the jury from focusing on what was the cause of the accident, who was at fault, and how do we make this person whole, which is what we should be focusing on. Instead, I'm sure what they did in this case, granted I wasn't in the courtroom when they tried it, but they made this case all about how, looking at all the maintenance history, every single driver, the history. We've got a really safe driver here from what I could tell from the facts. I mean, we've got somebody that has 45 years of experience not a long history from what I could tell, especially given the court's decision here on safety issues. It was just an accident, and that's what we have insurance for. That's the reason that we want to make these people whole. But at the same time, a $7 million verdict is just so out of proportion with the reality of the facts here that these cases continue to happen day in and day out, despite continuing to focus on safety in our industry. I'm sure this company and this driver focused on safety as well. We end up with these nuclear verdicts that are just putting us out of business.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with the cost of the accident at all. This has everything to do with punitive damages, right? Punishing the either one for not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I think it's relevant to ask, from what I read in the case or from what I read in the article, the driver was actually knowledgeable in the rules. I mean, it wasn't like the driver was acting stupid or didn't understand. In fact, most of the questioning, the driver was very good at knowing what the rules were, what he was expected of him to do, and understood that he'd made a mistake and turned the wrong way, and didn't know it at the time. And then when he hit a bridge, he was unaware that it wouldn't clear at the time, and because of that, he'd had an accident. But we're talking about a $300,000 damage to a $7 million damage. So how did the jury come to figure out that, not the jury, but the appellate court come to figure out, hey, he really was a safe guy after 45 years of driving, and he really did know what he was talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it's like we're seeing in so many of these cases, Dave, where, you've got to look at the facts. And look, the courts of appeals are always going to try to defer to the jury, right? To look and evaluate the facts and see what they think is right and fair. And I think it was very evident in this case that there wasn't gross negligence. I mean, there was not negligence by the driver, negligence by this company to such a degree that it justified a $5 million punitive damage award in this case. And, that's the problem that we have right now, I believe, at the trial level, is that we have juries being asked to look not only at what caused this accident, how do we make this person whole, assuming that the company's at fault, but we've got them looking at punitive damages too. And it's muddying the water, and it's creating a scenario where really, I think, putting juries in an unfair position right now to have to evaluate two things at the same time. And I think that's resulting in a lot of these verdicts that are coming down with disproportionately high punitive damages. Fortunately, in Texas, there are some caps that we already have in place related to punitive damages, but still at the same time, you've got to look at the facts and circumstances of the case and say, look, was this guy so willful? Was there such willful misconduct or such knowing disregard for what they were doing that it rises to the level of we need to punish them? Because I think it's important for people to understand the purpose of these punitive damages. Punitive damages are designed in order to punish companies that are doing things the wrong way, to essentially get their attention and make them pay a price, so to speak, on the fact that, look, we can't have this continued conduct. And I don't think, and it was apparent here that the Court of Appeals didn't believe the evidence rose to that level. And so they overturned this case and this award and kicked it back down to the trial court to have them look at it again, which I think was very appropriate.
So, and as we look and examine this particular case, and we talk about it, this was prior to the ruling, House Bill 19, right? This is actually prior to that, so it doesn't fall into that. How does that separate from this here? What are the two things that is going to make this different? It's going to be in the opening part of the trial, right? It's going to make it change. So how does House Bill 19 much different than this case?
Yeah, I think the passage of House Bill 19, so House Bill 19 that we passed last legislative session only applies to lawsuits that were filed after September 1st of last year. And so we're still in the process of waiting to see, the material impact that this legislation is going to allow in the state of Texas. We're already starting to see more insurance companies come back in the market, which is good. But let's talk about House Bill 19. What would have differed in this case if they would have utilized the benefits of House Bill 19? What we would have done is we would have split this trial into two parts. And in the first part of the trial, we would have just focused on what was the cause of the accident, who was at fault, and how do we make this person whole. And assuming that the trucking company, which it appears here probably was negligent to a certain degree, right? If only when we determine that in the first phase of the trial and the trucking company is found to be at fault, then we're going to go to the second phase of the trial and we're going to talk about, look, was this company adhering to the regulatory guidelines that are expected of companies in our industry? Were they doing a good job in their hiring of this individual? Was this individual that was driving, what did his track record look like? What was he doing? Did he have a history of issues like this, or was this just a one-off type situation where he made a mistake? And I think when we start doing that, we start getting these juries to focus on what they need to, instead of letting these trial lawyers utilize this reptile theory and coming into these lawsuits and muddying the water in the first phase of the trial, so to speak, and resulting, in my opinion, in these nuclear verdicts and verdicts very similar to this. And so I think, post House Bill 19, we're going to start seeing these types of verdicts come down. And I think it's going to give these appellate courts the ability as well to start reviewing them appropriately, especially within the facts, because they're going to get a record from both phases of the trial. All the testimony, that's all written down, and they're going to be able to see what the facts are and make sure that the jury awards are consistent with what the facts of the case are. And it in this case was obviously the Court of Appeals didn't believe that was the case, and I think we're going to see more of that going forward. But we've got to continue to press on this. We've got to continue to make sure that these trial lawyers can't continue to destroy our industry with this reptile theory, because look, the jury awards, they're conditioning people right now to believe that awards like this are appropriate. You see every other billboard out there, at least in San Antonio where I am, is, have you been hit by a big truck and we got a, $40 million award. I mean, people start thinking that that's normal, and it's not. I mean, this is not a normal environment and normal jury awards that hopefully we can start to get our hands around. Look, the doctors got it back when they passed all their medical malpractice reforms back in the early to mid 2000s. And look, it's our turn now. I mean, this is killing industry, and it's killing our industry specifically, and it's having a huge impact on the supply chain.
So I'm going to ask you, and I know you speak it, and I know you work at the TCA and the ATA, and I know you have a large voice there. How do we, as a group of individuals, go to the very lawyers that benefit from these types of deals and get them to pass law for tort reform? I mean, how do we get with our legislatures and to also go up against the big money that's following these, right? Because they're backed by financial corporations to go after these people.
Yeah, the whole system's broken, right? I mean, we've got trial lawyers right now that these lawsuits are being financed by third-party finance companies. Instead of investing in stocks and bonds, they're investing in lawsuits. And that's, I think, when very clearly that this situation's gotten out of control. And so what we as an industry have to do is get coordinated. We need to be involved in the associations that support our industry, both at the state and federal level. Get involved with ATA, get involved with TCA at the federal level. We're working diligently up there. I've always been of the opinion, if we had the ability to try these cases in federal court, that would have a hugely positive impact on the outcome. Not that it would have, frankly, any impact on people's ability to recover and make them whole if we are at fault, but it would provide a fair venue in which to try these cases, which is really the intention of House Bill 19. And so we're working on that at the federal level, amongst many other things. All of your listeners need to be involved in their state associations. ATA does a good job of having the heads of all our state associations get together and really coordinate on these issues. When we passed House Bill 19, I was at the ATA conference talking with the heads of other states associations on how we did it, together with John Esparza, our president, CEO. And look, we've got another legislative session coming up here in Texas.